My boyfriend has a work wife and I hate it. Story time. Me and my boyfriend have been together for nearly 4 years now, and we've been long distance for 3 of those years. This has been because of the pandemic and the fact that we both just live in different cities. There have been absolutely no reasons for me to not trust this man. All of these years long distance, nothing has ever happened for me to doubt his feelings or lose his trust. That was until 3 months ago. In our relationship, we often talk about our days, like what happened at work, etc. And everything was pretty normal until he started talking about this one co-worker. We'll call her Amy. So my boyfriend, we'll call him Steve, has worked there for 2 years and Amy had worked there for 5+ years. And to be honest, I can't even say if they only recently met because they've always been in the same department and on the same team. In all his time working there, I have never heard him talk about Amy, at least sort of not how he's talking about her now. So anyway, buckle in. So Steve starts telling me how amazing Amy is and how he is just so happy that he has found Amy as a friend. Now I was all alright with that until he says that she is his work wife. Now I know the concept of a work wife and a work husband, and to be frank, I don't like that. So at that point, I asked how long they had been each other's work spouse. And he said it had been about 3 months. And then he said about how his office had started to joke about how good him and Amy look together. So apparently his office are trying to get them together by giving them projects that they always have to do, just the two of them. And this has made them grow closer. He always tell me how they look after each other. And Amy even goes as far as to pack my boyfriend lunch every day. So apparently Amy would often ask him what he wanted to eat, then she would go home, cook it and bring it for his lunch the next day. You know, I really couldn't bear to hear anymore. I just felt so betrayed. I just feel so lied to. I just keep thinking about all the times I'd asked how his day was and this Amy girl and these stories just never came up. I didn't even know Amy and him were even that close. And then I never had any idea about his co-workers teasing them. And now I just don't know what to do. I have spoke to Steve about it, but he says that I'm just blowing things up for no reason. And I just feel so betrayed. What do you think I should do? Because am I the arsehole for not telling my boyfriend that I'd had plastic surgery? I've been dating this guy for about 4 months now. When I was 22, I had a nose job because I'd broken my nose twice as a kid and I was left with quite a large bump. Then when I was 23, I had my boobs done, which bumped me up a few cup sizes as well. To be honest, these were lifelong things that I've been insecure about and bullied over, so it was a relief to get them done. So now you've got the context, let's move to the present. I met my boyfriend, we'll call him Steve, through a friend. And up until now, things have been great. Last night, I was sat on the sofa with him just scrolling through social media. And this is when I stumbled upon an old classmate's vacation pictures. In the picture, she's wearing a bikini and she quite obviously has had her boobs done. Now, don't get me wrong, she looked great. But you know, you could defo tell there was a little something in there. So Steve glances over and he just says, gross. So of course I then asked what's your deal? And he said that women that get implants or other procedures are a massive turn off to him. He then went on to say how men prefer women that are natural and don't have 2 balloons on their chest. And he just kept saying how insecure it made her look. So you know, I just couldn't help but laugh. So I turned around and said, well, you're turned off by me then. And of course, he got really confused and asked what I meant. So that was when I informed him that I had had procedures done. He kept denying it and saying that I was just joking. That was until I showed him old pictures of me. He then got really quiet and left shortly after that. I then got a text from him saying that I should have disclosed this to him on our first date. And that I have led him on. And now he's saying how he needs to reconsider things. It's now the next day and I still haven't heard anything. And I am just so bewildered by the whole situation. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for getting my sister-in-law arrested at her wedding? So I rescued my dogs about 6 months ago from a puppy mill. When I first got them, they had quite a few medical issues, but they've adjusted to their new life really well. And my now sister-in-law, we'll call her Amy, had met the dogs a couple of times before the events of this story occurred. Amy asked if my dogs could be the ring bearer and flower girls at her wedding. I should probably just say that me and Amy do not get on at all. And in the past, she's said some really cruel things about me. She says these things to my family and everybody else who will listen, to be honest. Probably worth mentioning that I'm not even invited to the wedding because I would, quote, ruin the vibe. So I told her that she would not be using my dogs in her wedding for multiple reasons. One of them being, I wasn't invited to the wedding, and also that the dogs were having surgery a couple of days prior. Safe to say, Amy was not happy about being told no. So this event happened a couple of weeks ago. So all my dogs had had their surgery on a Thursday, and the wedding was set to be on Sunday evening. So me and my husband went to run some errands on Sunday morning, and when we left, all of our dogs were asleep. So all of a sudden, I get a notification about motion at my back door. So obviously I check the notification and I see Amy just opening the door and walking into our house. So I turned to my husband and I was like, we need to go back to the house now. So at this point, I call my brother and I'm like, get your wife out of my house before I call the police. My brother then hung up on me. And when I got home, all my dogs were gone. And their cones from the surgery that they had 3 days ago were left in their crates. So again, I'm popping on the phone to the police for breaking and entering and, theft. So the police arrived and I showed them the video of Amy just walking into my house. And then the one of her leaving with our dogs. So obviously it's the morning of her wedding, so I told them where the venue is because I'd seen a copy of the invitation. So the police made it to the venue and they were able to locate every single one of my dogs. And because they didn't have the cones on, one of them had managed to open one of her stitches and she was bleeding. Amy was arrested in the middle of getting ready for her wedding. Actually ended up getting charged with a Class A felony and then a couple of misdemeanors. Now everyone's saying that I overreacted about the situation and that I ruined the whole entire wedding. And then some people are saying that I should pay for the whole wedding since it didn't get to go ahead. So what do you think? This is the split-second decision that changed my life. So one day I decided to break up with my partner. The timing just wasn't right. I was only 20 and I just wanted to go out and party. I had a full-time job and on top of that, I was in a full-time student programme for aerospace engineering. I called her and asked if we could meet at the science building, and to this day, I don't know why I picked the science building. I think it was because it was close to her dorm and close to the parking lot, so I could get it over and done with and then dip as quick as I could. And as I saw her walking towards me, I looked up for the last time as my girlfriend, and at that point, I started reminiscing about our relationship. There was all the ups and downs, how it began, and at this point, it had only really been about 6 months. And I thought as she was walking towards me, and she was 100 and odd feet away at this point, I had started dating her because she was marriage material. She was mature, beautiful, and super fun to be around. And anyone would be so lucky to have her. It would have been so hard to find someone like her. And not only were our sense of humour super similar, we also really complemented each other as well. I would hate to see her cry, and it would have been so hard to find someone like her again. Actually, do you know what? It wouldn't have been hard at all. It would have been absolutely impossible. So I was thinking, yes, it's going to be hard to find someone, but at least I'm going to get these next 3 to 4 years to myself. And after that, I'll just have to find someone as perfect as her to spend the next 40 years with. But then it hit me that I'd be trading 40 years of pure joy for 3 to 4 years of just immature fun. And that was when I realised I was about to make one of the biggest mistakes of my life. And it was only when she got about 30 feet away from me that I decided to change my mind. So fast forward, we are now 28. This woman is now my wife of 3.5 years and is currently carrying our first son. And now I just couldn't be happier. Tomorrow, I'm going to ruin his life. Story time. I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years now. We had planned on getting married when our lives had settled down. I love him more than anyone else in this world and I've sacrificed so much for him. I've moved away from home, turned down jobs, and it was all just so I could stay with him. I stood by his side when he decided to go back to school and I just gave him the world. Then he cheats on me. I found out over a month ago, but the scumbag got cocky. And I found out he was cheating on me with 2 different women. One of them is a TA at his university and the other one is his best friend's girlfriend. I wrote this post choking back venom. I loved him so much, but now he'll be the world I burn to nothing. So I pay for everything since he quit his job last year to go to school. No, I was more than happy to help. I make enough to support us both. The only upside of it is that all of his student loans are in his name and have no connection to me. It'll hurt to push the scumbag out to sea, but I'll survive. So I've held out for a month, which is enough time to plan what I like to call the day his world burns. So tomorrow we are hosting a party. I've arranged for his family to come, but unfortunately my family can't attend. I've packed everything valuable already and the suitcase is in the back of my car. So my brother will come and pick up the car during the event tomorrow, which my boyfriend would normally drive himself to school in, even though the car is in my name. The joint account, which is all my money anyway, is already empty. The event will be great and he thinks it's so that we can announce our engagement to his family. However, what will happen in reality is this. I will announce my departure from his life. I already have a new job lined up which is in a different state. I'll start by showing him the screenshots of what he said to these other girls and the many other degenerate things his mind came up with. And then these will all be passed around the room. I will then hand him the notice to vacate as I've already broken our lease. We need to be out of the property by the end of the month. I will then end off by saying that I've reported that he was sleeping with one of the TAs from one of his classes last semester and that I am really sad that I won't see the fallout from that situation. Oh, and his friend also has a message for him that I will deliver, informing him that his friendship group never want to see him as well. And with that, I will leave and I will not look back. Am I wrong for sitting on my boyfriend's friend's lap? Me and my boyfriend, we'll call him B, have been dating for about 2 years. He is very intelligent, thoughtful, and super polite, but he is a massive people pleaser and does not like confrontation at all. He has his best friend, we'll call him K. Kay has these big eyes, a cute button nose, and is just super adorable. However, he does have an awful personality. He's the type of person where if you don't know him, he's just prickly and rude. B says that is literally just how he is. Kay likes to make fun of me all the time, but my boyfriend says it's just him teasing and that he does really like me a lot. So my boyfriend keeps inviting Kay on outings that are supposed to be dates. Most recently, we had organised to go on this little hike, like a nature outing type thing. So when I arrived, I found out that he had also invited Kay. So the three of us did this easy, but it was quite a long hike for the entire day. And at the end of the hike, there's like this little ride that takes you back down to civilization. It's quite hard to explain, but it's basically like a truck that's attached to a trap that has seats. So it's not like enclosed or anything, you can still see the night sky and you can feel the breeze. And the ride comes around every 2 hours. When we got on, there was loads of people waiting, so I didn't manage to get a seat. The driver kept yelling at me that I wasn't allowed to stand up. So I asked B if he wouldn't mind moving over to make a gap, considering I'm quite small. But he said he didn't think it was allowed, considering it was just one seat. And he told me just to wait for the next ride to come. And I did not want to wait alone in the dark for 2 hours to wait for the next one to come. And the driver was yelling at me to either sit down or get off. So then Kay said that I could just sit on his lap. I wasn't in the mood to joke around anymore, so I just sat down on his lap. So the ride takes around 50 minutes to an hour. We got off, my boyfriend and I just went to our car, and I thought that was the end of it. So my boyfriend in the car says that I embarrassed everyone and Kay with the stunt I pulled on the ride. He said how I'd acted really immature and I shouldn't have done what I did. And he said that I should have just waited for the next ride to come. He requested an apology and I said, well, I haven't done anything wrong. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for letting my husband's party go horribly wrong? So my husband threw a barbecue party for his friends and it was a complete disaster. So my husband likes to invite his friends and note his friends around for barbecues. I'm not close with them at all. And this man prides himself on his barbecuing skills. But the thing is, I'm the one that always ends up doing everything. So all he ever does is sort of just buy and grill the meat and then he collects praise for the whole event. Whereas it's me that buys the drinks, and then it's also me that has to clean up and tidy the patio and decking area. I prepare all of the sides and vegetables for him and his friends. And then throughout the night, I'll make sure that everyone's drinks stay topped up too. We don't use like plastic paper cups and stuff like that because I find it a little bit wasteful, so I wash up at the end of the night as well. And I'm not gonna lie, it just kind of feels like non-stop work for me all night. And literally last week he was like, I'm having all my friends around this Saturday. I was like, okay. And I said, like, do I know anyone? He quite abruptly said no, and that it was all of his friends from work and none of their wives were coming. It was just a boys' night. And I was like, fine, guys' night. Fine. So I said, if you need me, I will be in my craft room with a bottle of wine. Do not disturb me, but you enjoy yourself. And he was like, yeah, I can handle it. Spoiler alert, he did not handle it. From what I can tell, he did the meat all fine, but he just didn't do any of the other preparation. I was so sick and tired of being taken for granted. And to be fair, he never actually asked me for help. I just do it, but it kind of felt expected. So I just sat back and did nothing. The patio was an absolute mess. All the upholstery on our furniture was so messy from the dogs. There was stuff just absolutely everywhere. The table was messy. So they all arrive, I welcome them, say hi, and then I excuse myself to my craft room. So I just popped some music on, I drank my wine and just worked for a little bit. Cue the messages. He started asking for help. He's like, where are the plates? Context, we only keep a small amount in the kitchen. The rest of them, they're in the basement. Where are the cups? Why isn't the beer chilled? Where's the non-alcoholic beer? Did you not buy it? The sides. And I just replied and said, you were handling it. So this is where I feel like I might have been the arsehole. Let's face it, it would have taken me literally minutes to tell him where everything was. I checked on the guys a little bit later and it was an absolute disaster. Everything was everywhere, the table was all cluttered. They had to order takeout so they could have some sides. There weren't enough silverware or dishes. Someone literally had to go and drive to get more drinks. Today, he's been super grumpy all day and he has said that he's disappointed in me. He said he's sad that I didn't pull my weight and that I was the one that had made our family look really sloppy and bad. I told him that I am not his little housewife. I said if he embarrassed himself in front of his workmates, he's a big guy and that's on him. He got really mad and went for a run to blow off some steam. Oh, and the patio is still full of dishes. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for telling my mum I refused to fix a problem that she and my stepsister created? When I was 15, my then 19-year-old sister had a baby. was still living at home at the time and she didn't know who the dad of the baby was. And my mum had decided that I would need to babysit every night after school until someone got home. Me and my stepsister were never family, we never called each other sisters. So because of that, I never called her daughter my niece or planned on being an overly impactful auntie. And after I moved out, I've seen her 3 times in the past 6 years. I did not have a strong attachment to her, nor did I ever consider her one of my own. But my mum and sister had hyped me up to her, apparently. They've told her all of these stories about me that just simply aren't true. There was stories about how I used to cuddle her to sleep and call her my baby, and apparently how I adored her more than anyone else in the whole world. So my mum had taken a few pictures of me and her that she'd staged when she was a baby, and she shows her these pictures as if they're moments that my stepsister and my mum just sort of walked in on. So she has now been waiting for this aunt figure who just considers her child. So we've seen each other for 3 times this year, mostly because I'm having a baby. And this girl has been so incredibly jealous and angry about it. So the last time we saw her, we were at our grandparents' house and it was focused around the baby and she was very emotional about it. And she kept randomly trying to grab my attention. And this is when what my mum and stepsister had been telling her sort of came to light. She was accusing me of replacing her and with my baby sort of stealing her place and saying stuff like I was trying to push her out of our family. She was saying like, oh, you used to do all that stuff with me and now you don't care about me. And she sort of kept saying how none of it was fair. She kept trying to ask my stepsister to do all the stuff I was doing with my new baby with her again. So this is when what my mum and stepsister had been telling her all came to light. And she basically wanted to dedicate myself to her again the way I apparently had when she was a baby. And she said that she wanted me to put her before my own child. So my grandparents actually ended up telling my stepsister that she needed to leave. And after a whole lot of arguing, she eventually left with her daughter. My grandparents turned to my mum and was like, what the hell were you thinking and what happened there? So everything eventually settled down, but my mum called me that night and said that I needed to ring the stepsister's daughter so that I could sort everything out with her. She basically said that I was the one that needed to fix the hurt that she was going through. And I told them it was not my job to fix a problem that her and my stepsister created. So what do you think? I broke up with my boyfriend over the Super Bowl commercial. Storytime. So for those of you that are unaware, during the Super Bowl, Tubi, which is the streaming platform, played a prank on the viewers. They basically made it look like someone's changing the TV over to their app. And I'm sure in many households it caused chaos and was a funny event, but not mine. My boyfriend thought that I was the one changing the channel and started screaming at me violently. And he was calling me things that I don't even want to write down. Even when I kept telling him that it was a commercial, he kept blowing up at me. He even punched a hole in the wall. So he eventually realised what had actually happened and really awkwardly apologised. But I was so disgusted to his reaction to a 15-second commercial. I feel like if you can't keep your anger in check and get violent over something so small, I don't want to be around you. We've been together for over a year, but we've been living together for the past 2 months. And I have known him to get angry at things sometimes. This really took me off guard. And I cannot forget how I felt around him during all of this. So in the morning, I packed up some of my stuff. And I'd been staying at my parents' house. I'd left him a note basically saying how I felt and that I didn't think we were going to work long term. Since then, he has been messaging me and calling me repeatedly. My parents told me that I was just overreacting since he's had a bit to drink and the Super Bowl gets everybody riled up. But I don't feel like I am. I don't feel like it's normal to get that angry. Am I wrong for wearing a wedding dress to a wedding? So this girl I've been friends with for a few years recently got engaged. A week ago, I got a DM from her saying she was having a small costume party to celebrate her getting engaged. So I asked if there was a theme and she said there wasn't. So I'm a cosplayer, so I had a lot of choices. So I thought it'd be really funny to go to an engagement party as a corpse bride. When I arrived at the house yesterday, everything seemed completely normal. A few people complimented my costume and I was having so much fun. After about 10 minutes, my friend's fiance walked out in a black tuxedo and told everyone that this was actually their wedding. Apparently my friend saw a video of someone else doing this and she wanted to do the same. He asked us all then to go to the backyard so that the ceremony could begin. At that point, I went straight up to him. I asked if I should quickly go home, change my outfit and come back before the ceremony even started. And he told me it was absolutely fine considering that I didn't know it was a wedding. So I trusted him and I just followed everybody outside. They got married and everything seemed good. So the reception was at their house, so everyone just walked back inside and picked up where we left off. I kept trying to talk to my friend and celebrate with her, but she kept making excuses not to talk to me. I assumed it was because she was just tired and, it was such a big day. And I thought maybe she just wanted some space and alone time. I decided just not to bother her after that and the party soon ended. So about half an hour after I got home, my phone started blowing up with notifications. It was my friend and she was cussing me out saying that I ruined her wedding day. I was obviously really confused and asked, what did I do? And that only made her even more angry. She told me that it was basic knowledge not to wear a wedding dress to someone else's wedding day. I reminded her that I did not know that it was a wedding. And I said, I asked your now husband if he wanted me to go home and change, and he said that it was absolutely fine. So she didn't respond to that, but then I got a text from the husband asking why I would tell her that he said it was absolutely fine not to change. And I was like, babe, you were the one that told me it was fine. And then he says that I should have changed anyway. And now, of course, it's my fault that the two of them are fighting over this. I tried texting and saying that I was sorry and that if I'd have known, I obviously wouldn't have done this. But I woke up today to find that her and her husband had blocked me on everything. So what do you think? Am I wrong for kicking out one of my bridesmaids after she showed up in the wrong dress? My wedding was last week and I'm still getting backlash over this, so I wanted to know if I'm in the wrong. So where I live, it's winter at the minute and we've had a fair amount of snow. So my wedding was a winter themed wedding and I had a colour theme of forest green and gold. So my dress was obviously white and I chose my bridesmaids to wear forest green. And then I asked if my maid of honour could wear black. And then we were all wearing gold accessories. I had this friend called Kat that I had asked to be one of my bridesmaids. So we went shopping and I told them all the colour theme I was going for with the bridesmaid dresses. And Kat immediately said that forest green was not a good choice. She said that she doesn't think it's a flattering colour and that I should choose something different and more girly. And I said no, because my wedding is a winter theme. And I thought that that colour was perfect to fit the theme. She suggested pink, blue and even red. So I said no, but thanks for your opinion. She somehow found out that my maid of honour was wearing black and asked if she could wear black as well. And I said no, only my maid of honour was wearing black. Just adding in that I also paid for all the dresses. So let's fast forward to my wedding day. Everyone is getting their hair and makeup done, and Kat shows up 30 minutes late with a bag that looks like it has a dress inside it. So I asked Tino, what's the bag for? She said it was a dress for the reception and she wanted to have it there so if she felt uncomfortable she could change after we'd had pictures. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm not here for the drama. So we're all walking down the stairs. The ceremony's about to start in like 30 minutes. So Kat is the last person to come down and she's wearing a black dress. So at the time, I was preoccupied taking pictures with my parents, but my maid of honour came over and made me aware of the situation. So I did confront Kat and I asked her what was going on. She said that she hated her bridesmaid dress and it made her look gross, so she was just going to wear black. I asked her to please go back and change and she refused and started to walk away from me. I said, I'm going to ask you one more time and if you don't oblige, I'm going to call security and kick you out. She then began yelling at me to F off. So I called security and I told them to get her out. She started to make a massive scene, calling me a bitch. And then she said that I couldn't force her to wear anything and that I'm a horrible and inconsiderate friend. So the wedding went on and it was honestly amazing. Ever since the wedding, Kat has been blowing up my phone saying some really, really nasty things. She asked me for the money back that she spent on her black dress, since it was a waste and she didn't actually get to wear it. I literally had to block her number. But now some of my other bridesmaids have started giving me shit. They said it was a little bit harsh kicking her out and embarrassing her like that. So what do you think? Am I wrong for wanting my sister to walk me down the aisle despite my fiancé and his family's objections? So I was basically raised by my older half-sister. I never met my dad and our mum passed away when we were both young. My sister's dad was still in her life and was willing to support her but not me. My sister decided that she wanted to be my guardian and as a result of that her family went low contact with her. In order to raise me, she gave up a lot. She gave up her 20s, the opportunity to go to college and so much more. So a couple of months ago I got engaged and along with being my maid of honour I asked if my sister would walk me down the aisle. And throughout my life she has fulfilled so many roles for me. She's been my big sister, my mum, my dad, my friend. So it only felt right that all of those big roles were honoured on one of the biggest days of my life. And my sister was absolutely ecstatic. But when I brought this up to my fiancé, he was not happy. My fiancé's family are extremely traditional and he'd always expected his wedding to be a traditional white wedding. And his reasoning for this is because that role is normally done by a man. And apparently it had always been assumed that his father would be the one to give me away considering I don't have any male relatives. And I did tell him that I was really appreciative of his dad wanting to be the one to give me away. But I said my sister's the one that's made me who I am today, so it's only right that she's the one that gives me away. So this then turned into an argument that spread into my in-laws. My mother-in-law called me a few days ago and said even though she understands how important my sister is to me, that it's also my fiancé's big day too and I shouldn't be putting my sister in front of him on his big day. I definitely understand what she has to say, but this is really important to me. And at this point my sister's turned around and said that she doesn't even mind just being maid of honour because she doesn't want a happy day to turn so stressful. So now it's just me holding out and being stubborn. But I just don't want to give in at this point. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for telling my brother that girls avoid him because he's creepy and not just misunderstood like my mum insists? So my younger brother who's 18 has just started to show serious interest in relationships. He's a really sweet guy but he often just says things that come across like really weird. I guess it's not so bad day to day but it really does make his dating life a lot more difficult. For example, this one time we're at a beach club and he was chatting to a girl and she really did seem interested and engaged in the conversation. And just a little FYI, this girl was quite short and very petite. And my brother told her that she just looked so tiny and helpless. Which, you know, isn't too bad, but then he said he could easily abduct her because he could fit her in his bag. Now, because I know him, I know that he's not intentionally being creepy. I just don't think that he understands that some things sound really creepy when you say them out loud. And this poor girl just did this fake laugh, walked off and never came back. Then a few days ago, we were in a cafe and he met a girl again. They ended up swapping numbers and he came to me and excitedly told me that they were texting. Then yesterday, he came to me all depressed and he showed me their text exchange. So earlier that day, she texted him and she said that she wasn't a fan of scary movies because she gets easily spooked. So late that afternoon, she asked him if he wanted to hang out that weekend. And he jokingly said that he'd sneak into her room at night when she least did expect it and make her scream. He didn't think that was wrong at all and he only noticed something was up when she didn't respond to his text messages. So he's been pretty bummed out all day about it and he's been moping around the house. So I told him honestly and I said, you need to stop saying creepy things so that girls stick around. And then I said he's a big tall boy, which ups the creep factor to anything he says. He got very defensive and hurt and tried to say that he wasn't creepy. When my mum found out, she got all defensive of him and said it was wrong of me to label him a creep. She said that he's just a bit of a misunderstood soul and that I should have a little bit more tact instead of just insulting him. So I turned to my brother and I explained that he's not a misunderstood soul in other girls' eyes. He's just a big tall guy who says really creepy things. He got really upset and we had a big argument after that. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for refusing to go to my best friend's boyfriend's birthday after she demanded to approve my outfit? My best friend Kate has a boyfriend called Jamie and they've been together for nearly 3 years. We met him on a night out and although he's Kate's boyfriend, I would definitely consider him a friend. So Jamie's 30th is coming up and they've decided to throw him a really big party. I've even helped them with the logistics of it all when they've asked. So the other day, Kate texted me and she asked me if I wouldn't mind toning down my look for the party. And she asked if I could send a picture of my outfit once I decided what I wanted to wear. And I found this a little bit odd. So I asked her what she meant by this. And she asked me if I wouldn't mind dressing frumpy. And it was because she didn't want to be outshone on her boyfriend's birthday. When I didn't reply straight away, she went on to say that she really wanted Jamie's full attention that night. And she said she wouldn't get this if I showed up dressed properly. And I was a little bit annoyed by what she was implying here. So I said, if I'm going to be that much of a concern to you, I would rather just politely decline the invitation. She then freaked out and said that I was being immature because I wasn't allowed to steal the spotlight. I said that I would just send Jamie's gift and she could tell him why I wasn't coming anymore. So she never actually told Jamie the real reason why I wasn't going. Because he texted me and said that he'd heard that I was booked and asked if I could rearrange my plans. And I said I wouldn't be going because Kate was insisting that I dressed a certain way. And then he started to call me. And he said that a couple of months ago he'd gone out with a group of his friends and Kate. So everyone had had a lot to drink and the topic of how each couple met came up. And when it was Kate and Jamie's turn, Kate asked why he decided to flirt with her and not me. And one of Jamie's friends turned around and says it's because he knew he didn't have a chance with a hot one. Kate asked Jamie if this was true, and with him having so many drinks in him, he described it in a way that made it sound like it was true. He basically said that yeah, he did see me, but he knew he didn't have a chance with someone like me. He then went on to say that actually speaking to Kate was the best outcome of it all because he loves her so much now and wants to spend the rest of his life with her. He said that they had spoken about it since and Kate says that she's over it. But he's noticed some changes in Kate's behaviour that suggest otherwise. He then said that he'd been planning to propose to Kate at his party, and that is why he asked me to change my plans so that I could be there. But after all of these changes in her behaviour and hearing what I had to say, he's decided that he doesn't want to propose anymore. So after I spoke to Jamie, I did end up calling Kate and she did apologise. She said that she'd found a lot of self-worth in being in a relationship, but she did say sorry for trying to solve her insecurities through me. She then said, however, that she didn't know if she'd be able to have me in her life anymore with the way that she'd been feeling. So now I've probably lost a long-term friendship over the drunken awkwardness of other people. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for asking my boyfriend to stop being friends with someone? I know how that sounds, so let me explain. Me and my boyfriend Luca have been going out for about 2 years and everything's been going great. And he has a best friend called Tammy and I'm not gonna lie, their relationship makes me very uncomfortable. So about 4 years ago, Tammy and Luca actually hooked up. He said it was just a one-time thing and they very quickly realised that they were just better off as friends. This didn't bother me, he was very upfront about it and made it very clear that they were just friends now. He had a life before me and I very much appreciated his honesty. So one day near the beginning of our relationship, Luca looked upset. I asked him what was up and he said that he told Tammy that he was getting serious with someone and she had freaked out. And she said that she thought that at some point they would have got together eventually, even though she had a boyfriend at the time. So at the time, Tammy and Luca weren't anything, they were just having fun with people in between relationships. And this had really upset Luca because he thought they were just friends, so he felt totally blindsided by this information. He then didn't speak to Tammy for 6 months. So 6 months later, Tammy calls and she apologises. She said that she was in a bad place with her then boyfriend and that she missed his friendship. Luca spoke to me about it and I said I was fine with it as long as he was clear that they were just friends. Now I've been with my partner for 2 years and I met Tammy twice. Every time I'd invite to something that was a group event, she'd always say no and I didn't think too much of it. However, she then started to make appearances when I wasn't there or I was away for work. So she started to call up Luca and ask if he was alone or if I was busy, and if she'd had a bad day, she would say she just needed time alone with her friend. I finally snapped when I was away last weekend. So Luca had posted a picture of him and Tammy out for drinks. I had invited her to 6 different events this year, but she said she couldn't commit to anything until June 2023 because her schedule was too busy. I said to Luca, it upsets me that you only hang out when I'm not there because it makes me think something's going on. I don't mind them hanging out by themselves, but every time I'm away, Tammy is suddenly free. Originally, Luca said that he thought I was overreacting, but now he says that he sees my side of the story and he won't be friends with Tammy anymore. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for giving my mother-in-law a fake copy of our house key and exposing her at Christmas dinner? I want to preface this by saying I married my husband about a year ago. His mum is extremely snoopy and annoying as fuck. She can't help it, and it's just how she is, as my lovely in-laws say. So me and my husband moved into a new house recently, but my mother-in-law kept pushing to get an emergency key. And she promised that she would only use the key in an emergency. But given that she had a key for our old apartment and she walked in on us being intimate twice, my husband didn't think it was a big deal. I just didn't feel like I could trust this woman, but since she kept pushing, I sent her a fake key. And she had the most smug look on her face when I hand-delivered her the key. So days and weeks go by, and on Christmas dinner, my mother-in-law angrily calls out the fact that I gave her a fake key. And she shamed me for doing this in front of everyone. So in my defence, I asked her how she'd found out it was fake. And she said her and her husband had been around at about 4 when me and my husband were out the house. So at that point, I reminded her, didn't you say you would only use it if there was an emergency? So basically, you tried to get in when there was no emergency and you broke the promise you made to us. She started to go red in the face and everyone started to stare at her, and some even laughed at her for how red she was going. She then got up from her seat and ran into the kitchen where she had the biggest meltdown. It was so loud that even the neighbours next door could hear her. I've never heard a 60-plus-year-old woman throw a tantrum like that. Needless to say, the rest of the dinner was really awkward. My husband and his sisters kept giving me looks, and then my husband went off at me in the car. He said that I lied, exposed, humiliated, manipulated his mum, and he said he wouldn't have let me get away with this if he didn't know. And we then had this argument, and he's now demanding that I apologise to his mum. He said that I need to apologise for my childish behaviour and ruining Christmas dinner for the whole entire family. So what do you think? Am I the arsehole for fake sleeping all night to see if my wife's lying? Last couple of months, my wife had been complaining about our cats. Been complaining that they keep waking her up and that she has to keep getting up and opening the door for them. Or it's that the cats keep making noises or they keep jumping on her. And it had got to the point where she told me that she wanted me to get rid of them. And I said I'd never seen or heard any of what she was saying, but she claimed that I kept sleeping through it all. She kept saying that she was getting less and less sleep and started acting aggressive. She put the aggression down to her not sleeping and said that if I didn't get rid of them that she would end up leaving me. I'd legitimately started to think about giving the cats to my sister before I noticed something. This one morning, she woke up and she claimed that she'd gotten up multiple times in the night to help out the cats. And she started to list like a bunch of times that she'd got up with the cats in the night, but I thought that was a little bit weird because I'd been awake since 4 a.m. and she claimed that she woke up at 1 a.m. to let the cats out to open the door, and then a couple of times around 3 because they were meowing loads and they kept jumping all over her. I was in the bedroom the whole entire night while she slept and things just weren't adding up, so I decided to run a test. So I waited till she was going to go to bed, I let the cats out of the room, and then I lowered my phone brightness as well. I then faked going to sleep and I just lay there for the entire night, just awake. I got so bored. And thankfully, I didn't fall asleep. I made sure to make timestamps on my phone on Discord just to make sure. And I was making sure to make timestamps at every little noise that my cats made that night. So one of the cats jumped down from something and it made a little noise at about 3:18 a.m. And the other one ate food by the door, relatively quiet at about 4:18 a.m. Other than that, literally nothing happened. Sure enough, she slept from 11 p.m. till 9 a.m, but woke up saying that she'd been up at least 7 times in the night because of the cats. She said that she kept waking up to have to open the doors for the cats and that they kept jumping all over her. And I was so pissed because she was very clearly lying to me. I was just so exhausted and fed up with the lies that I bluntly called her out on it. I told her, well, that's funny because I stayed up all night last night to monitor the cats and they weren't even in the room most of the night either. I said, I have timestamps. Why have you been lying to me and trying to get me to get rid of my cats? And she just sat there quietly shaking and looking pissed. She then got up and left the room without answering. She then came back hours later but kept ignoring me whenever I talked to her. And then I finally asked her how I was the bad guy in this situation. Then she finally said that she felt like I treated her like a child by lying about being asleep and trying to catch her out in her lie. And that making timestamps as if I was an investigator was going too far. And she said that I was being an obsessive arsehole. And I only did it because she was threatening to get rid of the cats or she'd leave me. And her claims just weren't adding up. Am I the arsehole for telling my sister-in-law that nobody cares that she's pregnant? So my cousin, who we'll call Mary, lost her husband and 2 out of 3 of her children in a car crash. I'm sure you can imagine her and her other 5-year-old daughter are absolutely absolutely heartbroken. So anyway, today was the funeral and my brother's wife announced that she was pregnant the moment they walked in the door. And we were like, okay, congratulations, but please keep it on the down low for today. We arrived at the church, she kept making gagging sounds and then like rubbing her tummy saying, I can't imagine as a mum what she's going through. This was her first child, so she doesn't have kids already, so she would then take the opportunity to tell people that she was pregnant. Then afterwards at my aunt's house, my sister-in-law just kept making everything about her. Like if someone was in the bathroom, she'd be like, sorry, pregnant lady needs to pee. She legit told someone to give up their seat so that the lady with the baby could rest her feet. I ignored her all day. That was until she walked up to Mary, stuck out her flat belly and said, me and Isaac just found out we were pregnant and honestly, we are beside ourselves that this could happen to us. And at this point, quite rightly so, Mary broke down. And at that point, I snapped. Who even says that to a woman that has just lost 2 babies? I ended up saying loudly to my sister-in-law, no one gives an F that you're pregnant. I said, look around, it's not 1 but 2 babies' funerals, let alone the love of this woman's life. I knew you were an attention seeker, but you literally took the test 4 days ago, so you need to leave. She ended up leaving, but my brother did call me a fat bitter bitch. So my brother and her family ended up calling me a whole world of names afterwards and saying I was a horrible person because I made a pregnant woman cry. Mary and my aunt actually thanked me, but if I'm being really honest, I feel bad for making a scene. So please put me in my place if I'm wrong. But what do you think?
I was accused of sexually harassing a man and I got fired for it. I am terrified of telling you guys this story because of who I'm gonna mention. The company that I worked for is very powerful and I think that they would sue me if I said names, but I'm gonna tell you guys anyway because what happened to me was really unfair. Back in 2018, I had just gotten married and my best friend was working at a company called S3 in New York City. At first, it was a really good company to work for because I was making a lot of money. The job was not incredibly hard. It wasn't really stressful or anything, so I actually really liked it. A little background on S3. It was a totally male-driven workplace. Majority of the men were middle-aged white men. My best friend and I were the only young females there, so as you guys can imagine, surrounded by all these older males, get stared at a lot. So my desk was next to someone called Justin, and Justin is the villain in this story. Justin and I sat next to each other and we became pretty friendly, work friends. I was not remotely interested in anything with him because I was married. We joked a lot. We talked about music. I'm a huge movie buff because I'm an actress, and he knew that. Specifically a movie called American Psycho with Christian Bale, which is one of my favorite movies. The joke was that he would be perfect in that role because he was living in New York, working in finance. My friend and some of the other people that worked there told me that ever since I had been hired, Justin was really friendly, in a good mood all the time. He would joke. Apparently, before I got there, he wasn't the joking type. He wasn't like happy or in a good mood. So that tells you a lot, right? I'm actually so nervous telling you guys this story because I'm mentioning names, but look at those brows. So I was very grateful for this job because it paid really well. To be honest, I just never knew what was coming. By the way, you guys, Justin knew that I was married. Like, we talked about my husband. One day I get a message from the guy who hired me at the job, and his name was Gabe. He was the manager. I get a text from Gabe and he's like, basically, don't come in today. We don't need you to come in today. I immediately froze and felt sick to my stomach. Obviously that's weird, right? For your job to tell you that. And I even texted Gabe and said, what's wrong? He said nothing. Sorry guys, I had to turn on the AC because I'm starting to sweat. The following day, I'm fully expecting to go back into work because I went to work every single day. If I'm not mistaken, I get an email this time from Gabe saying not to come in. I immediately text Serena and I was like, what the heck? She said, just relax, it's okay, we don't know what's happening. And I was like, okay, fine. Later that day, she tells me if I could meet her in the park. We both had a bad feeling. She had a bad feeling. I had a bad feeling. And as soon as I see Serena, my best friend, she starts to cry. And then I start to cry. She wasn't alone. She was with Jason, who was somebody who worked at S3 as well. By the way, Jason did the exact same job Serena and I did and got paid a whole lot more than her and I did. A whole lot more. Which doesn't surprise me coming from white middle-aged men thinking that women should earn less than men. I think the first words out of my mouth were, what happened? And that's when she says, I don't know why they're firing you. We both cried. Her and Jason comforted me as much as they could. I went home. And when I get home, guess who I text? Because I'm trying to find out information. I'm trying to find out what happened, what went wrong. I text Justin. You're not gonna believe this. I just got fired. And I asked him, have you heard anything? Have you overheard any conversations about why I was fired? And guess what he says, you guys? Jesus Christ. Oh, if you ever need any financial help, let me know. I'm here for you. That's really kind of him. And he said no, that he hadn't heard anything. And I decided to believe him. I got an email from the company sending my severance letter. I emailed back and I think I said, why? Can I know why? Like, what did I do? They weren't telling me why. They weren't telling me anything. Is that even legal that you get fired and they don't tell you why? Months go by. I'm on my honeymoon. I didn't have my honeymoon right after I got married. I had it after. Serena calls me and she tells me, I finally found out what happened and why you were fired. And I remember her even saying, like, do you want me to tell you right now, or do you want to like wait until you come back? And I was like, no, tell me right now, which is so sweet of her for just even considering my feelings, because I was on my honeymoon and she didn't want to, you know, ruin anything for me. She tells me that one of the other girls that was working there overheard a conversation about how Justin had told the owner of the company, Justin told Bob I was offering him blowjobs when no one was around, and that I had done it on several occasions. Listen, I know men get harassed in the workplace, they get sexually assaulted, but here are the facts. I have been harassed. I have been sexually assaulted, and that's happened on several occasions. I would never repeat that behavior onto somebody else. I would never, ever do that. If you're watching this and that's happened to you, I'm so sorry. Also, why would I do that in the workplace knowing that I could lose my job? Why would I ever do that? So what could Bob, the owner, do other than fire me? Nothing. He was gonna fire me. They fired me. They didn't ask me questions. There was no investigation. You know what made me so upset? The fact that these people, they thought that I was a predator. And there was no way for me to rectify that. There was no way for me to be like, hey, that's not true. I couldn't defend myself. I wasn't given the chance to do that. This girl gathered that Justin had very strong feelings for me, that he couldn't deal with it, and that the only thing that he could do was to get me fired so that I could be away from him because he had very strong feelings for me. What happened to me after I got fired was pretty bad. I would say I was even traumatized. I was so afraid. What could I have done wrong? It was easy to just fire me, throw me away, like I was nothing. No explanation. It's like someone pulled the floor from under you and you're just left falling and you can't grab onto anything. Learn to recognize red flags and just, I guess, don't be as friendly to men in the workplace. And if you have a story time like mine that you want to share, you can send it to me on Instagram here. And I love you guys so much. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Story time about how I was accused of sexually harassing my coworker. This is my story time. I did post this yesterday, but it was like 5 minutes long, so here we are. Back in 2018, I had just gotten married and my best friend was working at a company called S3 in New York City. I was so excited to get this job, you guys. I was so broke at the time. Before that, I had worked as everything. I was an assistant, maid, served at like 20 different restaurants, worked at the strip club, and I did a whole slew of other things. This job paid me $8,000 a month. It was amazing. Like, I thought I was set for life. The job was pretty simple and it was really stress-free. I had to make phone calls and sell a financial app, and I was pretty good at it. Like I said, my best friend got me this job, and it was really nice because I got to hang out with her every single day at work. Now, my desk was next to somebody called Justin. Justin was one of the salespeople at the company. I heard from a few people that before I got there, Justin was not the friendliest. He wouldn't make jokes or laugh, but after I got there, his attitude completely changed. To be honest, I had fun with him. He was a great coworker, but of course, that was it. I didn't see him as anything else other than a coworker. He and I would make jokes all the time, talked about music and movies. He would talk to me about his dating life, and I would give him advice. This man either had really strong feelings for me, or he really hated me, because he ended up getting me fired. Part 2 is a story time about how I was accused of sexual harassment and I got fired for it. This is my personal story time, by the way. The villain of the story, named Justin, he and I got along really well, and I sat next to him every single day at work. By the way, Justin was the youngest guy out of the entire company. Everyone else was middle-aged white men, while me and my best friend are beautiful and young and gorgeous. As you can imagine, we got stared at a lot. To be honest, this didn't really bother me because I've been stared at a lot in life. But when you find out what happened, it's infuriating. Walking down the street doing this voiceover. This is how badly I want to post this. The owner of the company is Bob. Bob and I got along really well. You see, I thought I was taken seriously in this workplace. I thought that I had value. But of course, apparently to these older white men, I did not. Today I get home from work and I get a message from Gabe, my manager. I don't like Gabe. Gabe told me not to come into work. And the following day, he tells me not to come into work again. Can you see how this would freak anyone out? I had a really bad feeling. Serena had no idea what was going on. If she did, she would tell me. This girl had my back always. Part 3 will be up soon. Story time about how I was accused of sexually harassing my coworker and got fired for it. This is my personal story time. Well, when I was told for the second time not to come into work, I was completely freaked out. Serena, who got me the job, asked me to meet her at Central Park. I had a bad feeling. Can you guys believe that S3 asked my best friend to fire me? They didn't have the balls to do it themselves because they knew that what they were firing me for was completely unfair. I get to Central Park and Serena tells me that they fire me. By the way, another coworker was there. His name was Jason. By the way, Jason had the same job as Serena and I and got paid a lot more. Inequality does exist. Went into a depression. I was anxious. I was afraid. friend didn't know what had happened. Emailed the company asking what happened and they didn't want to tell me. Anyway, a couple of months later, I find out that Justin had gotten me fired. He told the boss that I was offering him blowjobs. By the way, when I got fired, Justin offered me financial help, pretended to be my friend. What an asshole. Story time about how my father blamed me for getting R-worded. Disclaimer is not my story time on Instagram. I started college 4 months ago. Little context. My parents are extremely strict with me. Never let me date or even have guy friends. I have zero social skills with guys. I can't tell if they like me. I can't tell if they're trying to take advantage of me. I can't even talk to boys. I've never even kissed a boy. Because of all of that, I wanted to live on campus. Parents didn't want me to. I decided that I wanted to. Luckily, my best friend got into the same college, so we decided to dorm together. The very first week, we got invited to a party. This party would turn out to be the worst night of my entire life. We both got ready and looked amazing for the party. We were dressed really well and our hair and makeup was done. When we got to the party, we were offered drinks right away. And boys were swarming us. Oh yeah, and did I mention I had never drank before? 2 drinks later, I was falling down. My best friend was trying to take care of me, but she was also drunk. That's when a guy comes up to me and asked me if I wanted to sleep it off in his room. Guess what happened? To his story time about how my father blamed me for getting R-worded. Disclaimer is not my story time on Instagram. At this point, my best friend and I are both drunk. I literally felt like I had no control over my limbs. I just kept falling down. Suddenly, a guy comes up to me and asks me if I wanted to sleep it off in his room. Because I have no social skills with guys, I thought he was just being nice. I thanked him and he walked me to his room. He sits me down on his bed and proceeds to tuck me in. I asked him if he could bring my best friend, and that's when he said that she had left the party. That is a total lie. My bestie and I would never abandon each other at a party, especially if we were drunk. When he said that, I decided to get up from the bed and he pushed me back down. He tucked me in again, and that's when I fell asleep. I must have slept for about an hour. When I wake up, he's still there watching me. That's when he said, "You slept for an hour." Then he just throws himself on top of me, starts kissing and grabbing at me and tearing off my clothes. I'm still drunk at this point and feeling super weak and dizzy. It was like the more I said no, the more he wanted it. And then he penetrated me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my father blames me for getting R-worded. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. That's when he forces himself on top of me and penetrates me. I'm feeling super dizzy at this point and I proceed to throw up on him. But it's like it didn't matter. He still kept going. Luckily, it only lasted for about 10 seconds because he you know what. Once he got off of me, I was full of vomit, my clothes were half ripped off, and I was trembling uncontrollably. He looks at me and says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize you vomited." And he undresses me and puts me in the shower. And the whole time, I couldn't move or say anything. Gave me a change of clothes and took me back to my apartment. After that, he wouldn't stop texting me. It's like he thought that I liked it. 2 days later, he asked me out on a date. When I said no, he got offended. He shows up after my classes to walk me to my next class, and he tries to steal kisses from me. The worst part is when I told my parents, my father blamed me. He said I shouldn't have gone to the party. My parents are very traditional. Now my dad is thinking marriage. He wants to meet him. So I invited my rapist over for dinner. What should I do? Part 4 will be up soon. Story time about how my stepdad caught me sending nudes to my stepbrother. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. I'm 17 going on 18. This is like a roller coaster, so you better strap in. I met my stepbrother 3 years ago. He was a new guy at our school. From the moment we set eyes on each other, it was like love at first sight. But my best friend expressed that she liked him first. But there was no way I was gonna step on her toes. But he had no interest in her, at least not at the beginning. One day my bestie and I go to a party, and my stepbrother was there. My best friend is gutsy. This girl went up to him and said, "I like you." And then she kissed him. He was shook. For the rest of the night, they danced and kissed. I, of course, was happy for her, but to be honest, I did feel a little bit of jealousy. So I decided to hook up with somebody else. Now, my best friend has a lot of insecurities, and she has an ED. My stepbrother found out about this and felt bad for her. So he decided to ask her to be his girlfriend, which looking back was really nice of him, but it really messed with her mental health. So essentially, he started hanging out with us all the time. So I had to pretend I hated him in order to not show that I actually loved him. And one night, I kissed him. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my stepdad caught me sending nudes to my stepbrother. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. But now that my soon-to-be stepbrother was dating my best friend, I had to pretend to hate him in order not to show that I loved him. I was infatuated and in love. Also, we were super compatible. We played the same exact sports, both loved jet skiing, we were both competitive swimmers. After about a year of him dating my best friend, he broke up with her. At this point, I knew that he also liked me too. There were too many signs for me to ignore, but we would both make the effort to hate each other. We would even start to fight in front of my best friend. It was just easier that way. I also had a boyfriend at the time, but I really didn't love him, so I decided to break up with him too. Here's some context. School was pretty small. School would throw a barbecue for 4th of July, and all the parents and students were invited. This is the crazy part. My mom hit it off with his dad. They were inseparable. He even asked her out on a date by the end of the barbecue, and they made it official 2 weeks later when he asked her to be his girlfriend. My mom was dating my crush's dad. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my stepdad caught me sending nudes to my stepbrother. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's on Instagram. Now my mom is dating my crush's dad. They made us spend the weekends together. Remember, at this point, I'm trying not to show that I'm actually in love with this guy. But now our parents are forcing us to hang out. Everything moved really fast with them. We got engaged 2 months later, and then married 3 months later. So now my crush was my stepbrother. Oh yeah, and my best friend hated me for it. My mom and I ended up moving into their house, so now I saw him every single day. Can you imagine having to live with your crush? Like him seeing everything about your life? I was constantly embarrassed. And my best friend friends started making up rumors about me. He started claiming that I was the one with the ED. But after we moved in together, things changed. Started being very sweet to me. Stopped fighting it, and we kissed. Everything was leading up to us doing the dirty. We were both sending each other nudes, and on one occasion, my stepdad caught me. I decided to tell him the truth. My stepbrother and I begged our parents to let us be together. Eventually, they agreed. We're both 18 now, and we're engaged. We're getting married next summer. True love is true love. I did the dirty with an underage student and fell in love with him. Disclaimers is not my story time. It was sending me on Instagram. Here's some context. I'm a first grade substitute teacher, and over the summer, I took some courses to be able to do high school. I just got out of an abusive relationship. My ex does not leave me alone. He began stalking me a couple of months ago. So I knew that I needed a change, and I moved to a different town. Because I'm a substitute teacher, I'm able to have my own side hustles. When I moved to this new town, everything was better. I was earning way more money, so I decided to drop my side hustles and focus on being a substitute teacher because that's what I love. I expected to be teaching around 7th grade or 8th grade. When I got to the school, they actually asked me if I could do 12th grade students. I was more than happy to say yeah. I was intimidated by these students right away. I'm 24, so I'm about 6 years older than they are, but these kids, I swear, could smell the fear on me. One of the boys came up to me and started asking me questions right away. How old I was, where I lived. He thought that I was a new student. When I told him I was his teacher, he went and sat down. For the rest of the class, he kept staring at me and I couldn't help but stare back. He was incredibly handsome. He was 17 going on 18. Part 2 is up. I tell him about how I did the dirty with my student. Please TikTok, do not delete this. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. Like I said, I was 6 years older than him, was 17 going on 18. So on my first day as his teacher, he would not stop staring at me. And at the end of the class, he actually handed me his phone number. I was actually shook. Coming from an abusive relationship, my ex would always talk down on me. He would tell me that I was ugly and fat, even though I was actually a fitness model when I met him, and he forced me to leave my career. So when the student gave me his number, I was really flattered. And guess what I did? I went ahead and sent him a text message. Over the next week, we actually ended up just becoming friends. We would text each other every now and then, and I could tell that he was catching feelings really fast. I know you're gonna roll your eyes, but we actually had a lot in common. After the first week, I was actually transferred over to another grade, and that's when he asked me if I wanted to go to the movies with him. When I got to the movie theater, he greeted me with a flower and a kiss on the lips. I was in shock, and we proceeded to make out the entire movie. After that, I invited him to come over to my house, and he said yes. At first, he was shy when we got there. After 10 minutes, he warmed up, and we started kissing again. At this point, I realized that maybe I shouldn't be doing this. I told him to leave, but he said he wouldn't. Then he kissed me again. Part 3 is up. Did the dirty with one of my students and fell in love with him. TikTok, please do not delete this. Disclaimer, is not my story time. I said I'm on Instagram. After we did the dirty at my house, we were inseparable. He was always coming over to my place since he lived with his parents, and I lived by myself. And he was so different from my ex. He would come over and cook me dinner. He would even help me do my laundry. 2 months later, he turned 18. This is when we told his parents about our relationship, and his parents actually loved me. And I also introduced him to my parents. Exactly a year after we met, he proposed to me. And to this day, we are married. Now here's the bad thing. People around our town started calling me a perv, and you know that other name, but he and I are so happy. And the people that called me all those names are now getting divorces. I'm still happily married and beautiful and young. You can say whatever you want in the comments, but when you're in love with someone, you just know it. Story time about how my crazy celeb ex made me take a lie detector test. This is my own story time. Like I said in part 4, he thought that the only reason I was working at that hookah lounge was because I was trying to be a hoe. He thought that I was trying to get rich men, was completely paranoid about me stealing money from him. A few days before that, he had slapped me for the first time. Do you know why he slapped me? Because we were arguing and I put a plastic bottle down hard at the table. He thought that was unacceptable, so he decided to slap me. A few days after that, grabbed me by my neck and threw me on the bed. The reason he did that is because I asked him never to touch me like that again. At the time, I never realized that people that are on substances are unreasonable. You can't tell someone who's on substances not to do something. They will want to do it more. He was already aggressive because of it. Because he thought that I was lying, stealing, cheating, hoeing around, he asked me to take a lie detector test. And of course I said yes because I wanted to prove to him that he was wrong. Follow for story time about how my abusive celebrity ex made me take a lie detector test. This is my own story. He asked me to do the lie detector test and I said yes. He makes the appointment and we show up. Let's call the lie detector man Tom. Tom looked me up and down and told my ex that I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. This right away makes my ex crazy jealous. He just stares the guy down. Then he stares at me. Like I'm the one that did something wrong. The guy straps me up to the machine and I'm already nervous. My heart would not stop racing. He asked me if my name was really Esther. Very basic stuff. Then he asked me about all the things my ex has accused me of. You guys, my ex thought that I was lying about my name. He thought that I was sleeping around, was stealing his money, that I was stealing his substances. After the test, he tells my ex that I had failed every single question and that I was a liar and that he needed to be careful. Ex grabs me and tells me that he's gonna take me home. I was terrified. Part 6 is up. Story time about how my abusive celebrity ex made me take a lie detector test. This is my story time. Once the guy tells my ex that I failed the polygraph test, which there should have been no reason for me to fail. I was being completely honest. My ex's face just turns red. He tells me to get in his car and he's gonna take me home. It was complete verbal abuse. He was calling me a dump truck, slut, a whore. Every single bad word you can think of, he was calling me. Get to my apartment and I literally run out of his car. I lock myself in my apartment and 2 hours later I see him peeking through my window. Because I'm an idiot, I open the door. Starts to cry and tells me that he's willing to forgive me for all the things that I lied about. Obviously, I couldn't convince him otherwise otherwise because I failed the polygraph. Come to find out 2 weeks later, the polygraph guy was a complete fraud. The test wasn't even real. But somehow my ex managed to get scammed. And of course, my ex didn't believe it though. He still thought that I was even lying about my name. 2 weeks later, he proposes to me in the bathroom while we're showering. I'm gonna have to do another part. Found my husband naked with his mom and then she punched me. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My mother-in-law is the most toxic, violent woman I've ever met. And she hates me because I married her perfect little boy. Everything started 5 years ago. My husband and I met on Hinge. Neither of us was looking for a serious relationship, but we ended up falling in love. We started going out on dates, and every time we would go on a date, we would end up just spending a week together. Eventually, I got my dream job and I moved to New York City. I was working in fashion and making 6 figures a year. As you can imagine, my life was amazing. He asked me to be his girlfriend and we decided to do long distance. It was totally fine for the first couple of months. He was the one that decided to drive 5 hours to come see me. 2 months later, out of nowhere, he decided to propose. But the thing is, I wasn't sure if I should say yes. We hadn't been together long, and he was already offering to move to New York City with me. My life was so good in New York, I didn't know if I wanted him to come be with me. When I said I wasn't sure, his mother called me to convince me to marry him. Part 2 is a story time about how I found my husband naked with his mom and then she punched me. Disclaimers are not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My mother-in-law calls me to convince me to marry her son. And guess what? She managed to convince me, so I said yes. He ended up moving to my apartment in New York City 2 weeks later. That's when my personal nightmare began. My mother-in-law started coming over to our apartment every single weekend to plan the wedding. But all she cared about planning was my husband's stuff. For example, she only wanted to go try on his suits. We didn't even talk about my wedding dress. And this woman had the audacity to plan the whole menu around his favorite foods. One day she comes up to me and says, "This is the menu for the wedding," without even asking me. No, I was not about to have corn dogs on the menu. Since we had a spare bedroom in our apartment, she started to sleep over. And she would tell my husband to sleep with her because apparently she was scared at night. At this point, she's planning the wedding. My husband is sleeping with her. And my family is paying for it. Part 3 is caught my husband naked with his mom and then she punched me. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. After she took over planning our wedding, we finally got married. I was so busy with work that at that point, I just didn't care. For the next few years, she started coming over to our apartment at least once a month. And she would sleep over. And sometimes my husband would sleep with her. I told my husband that it was kind of weird that they slept together and he told me that it wasn't. That they were just really close. One night I'm sleeping and I hear noises coming from the guest bedroom. I know that they're sleeping in there, so I walk over and open the door. That's when I see them fully naked. And my husband had his arm around her shoulder. Then she runs over to me and starts punching me. And then my husband tells me to get out. Then he gave me some bullshit excuse about how they're recreating childbirth. I kicked her out of the apartment. And my husband got mad at me. I no longer have a relationship with her and I'm thinking about leaving my husband. She still comes to our apartment and just flat out ignores me. What should I do? Caught my dad cheating with my best friend and he doesn't want me to tell my mom. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My dad and I have never gotten along. He's the type of dad that whenever I bring my friends over, he's literally always flirting with them. He'll make sure to be home when he knows my friends are coming. He's really into bodybuilding, so he's pretty fit. So he'll just walk out shirtless into the kitchen while my friends and I are having lunch. I'm constantly telling him to cover up because it's totally embarrassing. 2 weeks ago, I noticed something weird. My best friend was drinking a Starbucks in the kitchen, and when I came into the kitchen, I saw her and my dad quickly let go of their hands. Like they were holding hands. Of course, they played it off and I didn't say anything. Our backyard has a pool house and that's usually where my dad hangs out. By the way, my mom is an amazing woman. She owns a Pilates studio and basically pays for everything. Go to the pool house and that's when I find my dad going down on my best friend. His head was up underneath her skirt. I literally vomited as soon as I saw it. Part 2, when I see my dad's head underneath my friend's skirt because he was going down on her. I actually vomited right then and there. As I'm vomiting outside of the pool house, my dad runs over to me and says, "What you saw is a mistake." And I say, "Of course it was a mistake because you're gonna go rectify this right now." I handed him my cell phone so that he could call my mom. He grabbed my cell phone and threw it into the pool. Then my best friend comes out like nothing happened. He looks at me and says, "Will you please just stop overreacting? It's not that big a deal." I grabbed her by her hair and threw her down on the floor. And then I just started attacking her. So angry at my dad, I was even angrier with her. How could she? My dad pulls me off of her and she starts confessing to everything. Apparently, they've been doing it for a month. Whenever she comes to hang out with me, she'll stay in the pool house, hide in there for hours, and wait for my dad to come home. He was never my best friend. By the way, my best friend and I are both 22. My dad is 47. Here's the worst part. He swore me to secrecy and I agreed. Now they just make out in front of me. Part 3 is up. Dad will just start making out with my best friend in front of me. At this point, he doesn't care. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. My mom has had a hard time. This would tear my mom apart. I told my dad that if he doesn't stop this, I'm gonna have to move out of the house. This really woke him up though. He told my best friend that he couldn't keep seeing her. And now she's going crazy. She won't stop calling his cell phone or mine. She'll just show up to our house. Then I caught them doing it again. Of course, I threatened to move out again. Don't know how to handle this situation. What should I do? Lost my virginity before marriage and my parents want me to prove my virginity to them. What should I do? Come from an extremely religious family. In my culture, women should be virgins before they get married. So here's how I lost my virginity. To my cousin. My parents are super strict. I grew up hiding everything from my parents. When I was 14, this new girl came to my school and she basically corrupted me. I had never in my life before even kissed a boy or even looked at one. But she would take me to parties and this is where I started meeting a lot of boys. A boy asked me to be his girlfriend and I said yes. This is where I had my first kiss. The next summer, my parents took me to visit my uncles. This is where I saw my cousin. We were both exactly the same age, and as soon as we saw each other, we were pretty much attracted to each other. I know, it's really disgusting and messed up. I was 15 at the time. This meant I didn't know anything about anything. My cousin would flirt with me all the time while we were visiting, and it kind of became a game for us. Before I knew it, he got me alone in a room and decided to kiss me. And after this, we just started making out all the time when we were alone. Then he started touching me. Now, no, I did not give him permission, but we were both 15, and it was just understood that we wanted it. And then we did the dirty. Like all night. Part 2 is up. Lost my virginity before marriage and my parents want me to prove that I'm a virgin. And I lost my virginity to my cousin. So the first time I did it with my cousin, we did it all night. This was the first time I had ever done anything like that. At the time, I didn't think that I would ever have to then prove to my parents that I was a virgin years later. So after I lost my virginity with my cousin, everything went downhill. I started doing it with other boys. And I even started dating a boy behind my parents' back. My parents, like I said, are super strict. When I was 17, my dad decided to tell me that he had already offered my hand in marriage to somebody. So that meant I was promised to somebody I had never even met. The boy that I was promised to lived in a different country. So 4 months later, he came with his parents. And when I met him, I was in love. He was extremely good looking, super smart, and he liked me right away. We were both really compatible in every single way. But then I remembered that I wasn't a virgin. The first night we met them, my parents brought up the fact that I was a virgin. And my fiance looked at me with the biggest smile on his face. Not me sitting there knowing that I had already done it with 7 guys. From here on, I had to pretend like I was the perfect little virgin. So I basically cut off all the guys I was doing it with. Part 3 is up. Lost my virginity before marriage and now I have to prove that I'm a virgin to my parents. So after I lost my virginity to my cousin, I was screwed. My father promised my hand in marriage to a man who thought I was a virgin, and his parents celebrated the fact that I was a virgin. Anytime they came to dinner, we would always somehow end up talking about how I was a virgin. It was like the hot topic with my father and his dad. This is when the wheel started turning. I started thinking of ways to tell my family that I was no longer a virgin. And the only thing that I could come up with was telling them that I was R-worded. But that's obviously a horrible idea because then I would have to accuse somebody and it would just be bad. So I decided to just simply confess. I sat my parents down and I told them that I was no longer a virgin. But when they asked me with who, I could not tell them it was my cousin. Instead, I told them it was some random boy from school. That's when my father told me that I had to prove myself a virgin to get married. So I decided to go to a gynecologist and pay him to say that I was still intact. All he did was sign some piece of paper that said I was basically a virgin. So I gave it to my parents and they were happy with that. So guess what I did on my wedding night to pretend like I was a virgin? I saved some period blood. Part 4 is up. I had to pretend I was a virgin on my wedding night, and this is what I did. I saved some period blood from my last period. Since my father had promised me to a man that I had never met, who I did fall in love with, but I wasn't a virgin and was promised as a virgin, I had to do something. The wedding was absolutely beautiful, and my new husband and I were getting to know each other so well. So I knew that I did not want to disappoint him because he thought that I was a virgin. So when it came time to getting naked and actually doing it, I was already used to it, so I pretended like it hurt really bad when he put it in. Frozen my period blood in a Ziploc baggie, and I put it behind the bed underneath my pillow. So as soon as we finished, I had already scooped some blood into my hand and I just went ahead and rubbed it on. And it worked. He saw the blood, kissed me, and then we did it again. At this point, I just enjoyed it. No one will ever know this secret, and my husband thinks that I've only been his. So I guess it's a happy ending, right?